So this is step number one for our retreat project, and we are going to make the Enigma star. This is a 10-inch finished block from AccuQuilt, and it's a block on board. That means everything's cut out in one pass on the die. And so this is the units that we used. We used Melissa Collins's fabric, and she's a local designer. And this is what the instructions look like. We're going to go through because everything's cut out in your bag. The first thing you're going to do is take out all of your units and lay them out according to the picture. And so you've got this fan in the middle, and it looks like a fan. And then you have small quarter square triangles that go around the outside edge, half square triangles, excuse me. You can't really tell what they are. The shapes are cut out. Make sure you just lay them all out first next to you, and then you can see that finishes it out. And then we have this unusual looking X block, and it's an offset piece. There's no way you could cut this out, um, standard. And you want to be careful because there's a left and a right. So when you open them up, they're wrong sides together, and the left and the right pair up. And so these go in the 4 units. You have 4 squares in the corners, and those squares are batiks. I love pairing that up with Melissa's fabrics. It's a great accent to it. We sometimes are reluctant to use batiks with standard prints, but this is a great opportunity for you to see how beautiful it is. Batiks are perfect as a basic piece to it. And notice how they go together. Now you have a tiny little quarter square there, and then you're going to have a bigger quarter square. It almost looks like a butterfly. This is a great one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew part of that fan together. So that's that yellow piece, and we're going to be putting the triangles on the ends of them. Now, as you watch me do this, I have my 3 of my favorite tools. My 4th one you can't see yet, but it's my Ginger clippers. I like my Bianis all. I've noticed I put my pattern below my sewing machine so I can see it or nearby. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out those fan blades, and I'm going to attach that little quarter square triangle on the bottom. I use my Bianis tailors all to work into the machine, and I put them on the end. I love the Bianis all because it has diamonds on the pole of it, and that if I have to ease something in, I can. If you notice with AccuQuilt, those corners are engineered. That means that they have the dog ears all cut off. They fit perfectly. I finger press it, but my favorite tool for using finger pressing is called a point-to-point turner. Now, if you notice, I had another piece that it went through as my leader. I don't use like little scraps of fabric. I am always piecing something when I go in and out of my machine. So I continue to put those triangles on the ends of those blades, and I've got 4 of them that I'm building. Now, as I'm building, I have a little bit of ADD, so I honor it by not saying, "Oh, I can't pull them out and look at them before I'm done." I have to go out and I have to take a peek and see what I'm doing and see how it's going and get positioned in there. And I like to pull them out and be able to look at them and see how it's going with it. So I pull it out. I take my point-to-point turner. If you notice, I start about from the middle, and then I pull out. The point-to-point turner will not distort this like your iron will. Now, if you notice that first unit, I'm going to be pairing it up with one of my batiks. And so I'm not even done with all of them yet. And so I'm going ahead and I'm putting it in there. Now notice when you lay it down there, those engineered corners help you to line it up perfectly. You will never get it this perfect. Plus it has all the sections in there for you to go towards the points. You see that there are even places where you can see my 1/4 inch is accurate. You want to always use an accurate 1/4 inch. Scant 1/4 inch is bad math. You don't need it. You're using good tools. You've got an accurate 1/4 inch on your machine. You're using a thread like Aurifil that's not heavy. Scant 1/4 inch has lots of reasons, and none of them are appropriate or necessary for you to use because everybody's scant 1/4 inch is different. Now, if you notice at this point, I'm pushing towards that light, and I'm not pushing because there's more bulk in that yellow put together with that multi-print. And so I'm going ahead and working on my next one, and I'm going to send it through there. I work this way consistently. I rarely do all the left skies on a bunch of geese and then go back and do the right. I do the whole goose. So I do the left and then the right, and then I celebrate it. That's one of the things that might be missing where you're lagging behind because you don't celebrate enough. And the celebration is, how is it coming along? It's worse because if you don't do this, you start ending up, um, having to do a ton of seam ripping because, you put together 500 pieces wrong. And in this way, I'm finishing a whole piece. The other thing is, if I get interrupted and I don't come back to this for a couple of days and I have a bunch of these blocks, I don't have to try to remember where I'm at. Now look how this offset is. So now we're going to start putting the pieces together into the 4 blades put together, and we're going to stitch it out. And this is all on your instructions. And if you buy the die, which is a beautiful die to work with, all these instructions are printed on the packaging. Look at how perfect that's coming out. And again, I'm pressing towards the light batik. So when I put the 2 halves together, then I'm going to decide which way to press those 2 center seams so that they oppose each other. That's going to get the middle of this perfect. When you see mine done, it's not perfect, and I don't worry about it, but it is very close, and it's really good. And the reason it's not perfect is I'm sitting here, I'm trying to videotape while I'm doing this. I don't get wigged out about that. Okay, now see how the butterfly is turning in there? Now I'm going to try a couple things. I'm going to try sewing it from the outside in on the big part, and then I'm going to try to sew it the other way. And I'm going to finish a whole unit before I decide which way I like, because if I was going to make a whole bunch of these blocks, I get to experiment which direction I come at this from. So if you notice, I'm going around the back, I'm reaching around, I'm still working on that center pinwheel while I'm working on those outer points. Okay, I've pressed them, well, I pressed them both the same way. Well, the nice thing with the point-to-point turner, I've not added heat to this, it doesn't set it in place. So I can turn it and boss it around. Now look at how this is sewing together. It's very offset, but because you cut it with AccuQuilt, the die made the decision for you on the accuracy of the cutting, so I can focus on the sewing. So these are the parts that I'm putting together that way. We make 4 of those units because they're going to go around that center. So I'm going to keep working through on those units. Let me tell you, when I did this, I had a couple pieces that I had not, I think I probably had a partial fabric or something when I went through the die and the layers, and I had to rethink this. Boy, better that I did it on 1 than if I was trying to do this and doing it on 12 and then figuring out I had something wrong with it. And it was really only a couple of fabrics in that when I stacked them together, they were a little bit short. Now, at this point, again, I don't go to the iron. I do not go to the iron. You do not want to flatten these out that much, because when you flatten them out, and if you find that you have something off, you can't really, it sets it into place. That point-to-point turner or your fingernail, some of you have really good fingernails that you can do this same technique, are going to get that as flat as you need it to be. So if you notice here, I'm trying to figure out if I can get these guys together and I can send them through, so that I didn't like sending that little one through blind underneath. So I'm going to try it this different way. And I take that Bianizol to get that underneath the presser foot. I also use my freehand system, which is on my machine. It raises and lowers my presser foot. That's like having a third hand. So I don't have to try to figure out, I don't have to raise my foot while I'm trying to hold on to these fabrics with 2 hands. So point-to-point turner, pulling this out. The point-to-point turner also, we have some special edition ones that aren't white. I have one of these by each of my sewing machines. These fit together beautifully with that centerpiece. The AccuQuilt, we offer AccuQuilt a lot of education, but the AccuQuilt, for especially like people say, well, I bought it, but I don't use it. There are a lot of opportunities to use it. I probably use AccuQuilt cutting for maybe 85% of the things that I cut. I have reduced my stress on things not fitting together. And if you notice, I pull that forward. The other thing I like that Annie's Tailor's All is a very sharp point so I can get it into place. Now this is where I discovered I caught the thread a little bit onto from the back one, and I caught it on there. I just went in and clipped it. You see my little Ginger clips over there? Those are, I've used Ginger clips for more than 30 years, and I don't have to replace them. They last and last and last. And unless somebody goes out and cuts something like not thread and fabric with it, then they do get dull faster. Now if you notice, so what I'm doing is I clip those pieces in there. The reason I like to work chain piecing too, chain piecing people call them, they say, well, it's because you're saving thread. For me, it doesn't have anything to do with saving thread, as I don't have to go back and clean up the back of my quilts or anything that I do like that by cleaning up long threads. Because when I'm cutting them this close, I have no long threads to catch. So I'm going ahead, I'm looking at that and like, this is the one that I'm struggling with. So the other one is I love my clover seam ripper. If you notice, when I seam rip, I only clip out about every 5th thread, and then I pull out the rest of the thread. If you don't have a seam ripper that can do what I just did, get underneath that Aurifil thread and catch that with that inner piece, it's time to replace it. A seam ripper is a very inexpensive thing to replacing with a good one. We carry the clover ones, and they're the original ones, and the inside of that seam ripper actually can work the way it's supposed to work. The seam ripping is something that we cover a lot in our education because we do a lot of seam ripping. If you're struggling with seam ripping, you might be doing it wrong. Now that's hard to imagine because you feel like you seam rip all the time. If you can't clip out every 3rd to 5th thread and then be able to seam rip it, it's time to replace your seam ripper. Get a couple of them. I have one by each machine, and I have one in my travel case. Now if you notice, now I'm getting my parts together, and while I'm starting to work on this, I'm still going to work on that last butterfly, and I'm going to send it through, but I'm also going to be starting to work on building my block out. So I just keep working through the machine this way. Again, if I get interrupted, I don't have to try to remember where I was at. I just pick up right where I was going with this. So the two of them together. Now if you notice, it looks really wonky because it is wonky. It's a wonky X. This is why they put it on a block on board. AccuQuilt does these unusual shapes well. And if you notice underneath there, I'm governing that small triangle underneath. Keep doing my pressing as I go along. Build out my units. Now, that's where I had the discovery that I had something off. Now I'm going to be adding the corners to the sides, and I'm going to be adding the rest of the units, the butterflies to the side of that fan in the middle. And we're going to sew the rows together. Ta-da, right? This is a beautiful thing. Look at how fun it comes together. Look at how gorgeous this is. The total of this to sew it together probably took me about 20 minutes, and that was sewing and instructing. AccuQuilt cutting, just the cutting cuts 90% of your cutting time. I know it's a big investment. Invest with Inspire to Sew, buying your equipment. We always honor the best specials in the country, but the other one is that we offer specials that are even more special. And what we want to do, the best thing that we're going to do is we're going to teach you how to use it and use it more consistently. Please trust us on this. It does not, people are afraid like it costs a lot of money. It costs less than a sewing machine, and you're going to use it. You love fabric. Because you love fabric, you need to get cutting more fabric. In my lifetime, I won't be able to get everything cut up that I fall in love with, but AccuQuilt's going to get me there faster. And I get more done working this way. I said before, 85% of my sewing is AccuQuilt. It might be 90%. There's so many things you can do with it, and the tools are great to be learning how to put these pieces together. Look at how those corners fit together. So I work right in the machine. I am not jumping up and running to my ironing board and ironing these. I do not want them that flat. And even when I'm done, I do not need it that flat because you're going to put this quilt up against batting and it's going to take all those baubles that you thought you had in there. Now I'm working in the far right side of my block and I'm sending through, it's just a big old 9 patch, that's all. And if you notice, I took out my last butterfly block while I had a third of my block already built together. I would do this if I was doing 100 blocks. I would work this same way. Now you see that this is a 10-inch finished block. That means it's going to be 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches edge to edge. So now I'm going ahead and I'm putting on another piece from another quilt as my ender because my block is all inside of there. All my units are, all 9 of them are in there. So now I'm going to open it up and I'm going to do this where I'm going to send it through. Now I like to send the busiest part through on the top so I can control the seams. And so on this one, what I'm doing is I'm pressing that pinwheel away from the center. Now you see those center points, I'll use the point of my Annie's Tailor's awl to boss that through. And if you notice, we'll try to get those points matched up. I can actually push that all in there. I'm also going underneath the bottom of this to make sure my seam on the underside is working in there. My Annie's awl will help me to keep that in place as I go to the needle. That tailor's awl will get almost all the way under the needle. I've never broken a needle on the Annie's Tailor's awl because it's rounded and those diamond pieces kind of cause the needle to go right down alongside. You want to use that tailor's awl when you get closer to that needle because you don't want to put your finger under there, for crying out loud. Right? Well, maybe you've probably done it once or twice in your lifetime. All right, here we go. Taking my point-to-point turner, bossing those seams the way they need to go. And now I decided that I don't want to run into that pinwheel pushing, so I used the point-to-point turner to press those seams where I needed them to be as I worked into the machine. This is a beautiful thing. Please take the time to do this. This is a great, we're going to be using this block in our next lessons. And hopefully you enjoyed this Enigma block as much as I did. I'm not real wild about the name, and so I thought, well, what's in a name? I decided to go ahead and try it, and I love it. I love the way this turned out. It's a beautiful block to work with, and there's a lot of great things. If you go to AccuQuilt's website, you're going to see some great projects that they did with it. It is a 10-inch finished block. I didn't used to love 10-inch finished blocks, but it's a great one to put together, and you're going to love Melissa Collins's fabrics in this. It's a great use of this together. Thanks for being inspired to sew with us.